We have about 6-7 options on the table. We're 2 weeks, or March 29th is the deadline, so we do have a bit more time than 2 weeks. We have 8 weeks. What does it mean on what happens next? Is the EU going to give in, or does Parliament vote for the Theresa May deal?
So I don't expect you'll see much movement from the EU in the next 2 weeks, even though Theresa May has now got this supposed mandate to go back and renegotiate the withdrawal agreement. The EU is not going to reopen that. They're going to sit tight and wait and see what happens when Theresa May returns to the House of Commons in February and then tries to pass her deal again. And I think as it becomes increasingly clear that the options on the table are essentially Theresa May's deal, there is going to be no renegotiation unless the UK is fundamentally willing to change its red lines. And the issue of the backstop, let's not forget, the backstop is the way that it is because of the UK's own red lines, and the EU has significantly moved its own red lines in agreeing this backstop. So Theresa May might not get her deal the second time through again, but I think what you'll see is that as the no-deal option emerges, you'll get Labour kind of supporting her deal and even softer Brexiteers in her party starting to vote for a deal. So she might need to put it to Parliament again. There might need to be an extension of Article 50, but I think eventually my base case is still that some version of her deal gets through without substantial changes from the EU side.
James, I guess the chances of a no-deal Brexit, though, increasing by the day, and our markets largely ignoring it?
Only by accident, and this is, of course, the terrifying issue. It's quite easy to find that there is a no deal simply because Parliament's not got round to any other way forward. But people talk about a referendum. I think that's just not going to happen because the legislation surrounding the setting of referendum are very complicated. No one knows what questions to ask. And interestingly, for people who are not familiar with British politics, nobody in Parliament at the moment wants a general election. People say, oh yes, but Mr Corbyn wants an opportunity for power. He happens to have Hull and Hampstead as two constituency. Hull definitely wants out. Hampstead definitely wants in. He would break the party if he were to go to the election with a very clear stand on Brexit, to stay or to go.
Nina, into the weekend, it's good to see the Conservatives building bridges in Labour constituencies. I get that. Is it still all about the Irish border? Are we still focused totally on the Irish border?
No, I think that Theresa May is very much aware that in order to get her deal across the line, she might need the support of Labour MPs. So I think she genuinely is reaching out. When I hear from Labour MPs who've been in those meetings, they were kind of surprised that the Conservatives and Number 10 were actually talking with substance. And I think that ultimately what you might see is in order to get Theresa May's deal, either Jeremy Corbyn will abstain from the vote, saying that he's had a principled position, but vis-a-vis the Irish border, Tom, nothing is fundamentally going to change. So there will never be, and in my view, if it came to a no-deal Brexit, it would be because if the government's position and Parliament's position was that you need to have the position that is now endorsed by the ERG or the DUP, that it needs to be completely removed from the withdrawal agreement, then in my opinion there would be no deal. And I think that if it came down to that, and I don't think we're there yet, I think the EU would hold its line on that.
Yeah, well, that's right where I wanted to go. I mean, the bottom line is there's no way the EU, Brussels, Germany, whatever, there's no way they're going to hang the Republic of Ireland out to dry, right?
They're not going to hang the Republic of Ireland out to dry, but of course, let's not forget, and even though both Dublin and London are not engaging with this right now, if there is a no-deal Brexit, then you basically have a return to the hard border. And, they're not willing to engage with that, but that is the political reality. And, of course, the ERG is saying we need to hold tough because this whole need for a border in Ireland is just a hoax by the EU. But I think if it came down to that, I mean, eventually you would have a no-deal Brexit, a return to a hard border, and a lot of political fallout that would make it extremely difficult for the UK to try and negotiate an FTA with the EU after it's departed on such a hostile terms.
And James, you also expect, like Nina, basically a base case where it gets passed, through Parliament after, 1, 2, possibly 3 votes. How long could it take? And in the meantime, what are markets going to do? More volatility?
I think markets should fret because of the uncertainties. But I think that after the election, after we have got some form of Brexit deal through, I certainly believe the British economy has the opportunity to positively surprise. So I would be expecting money rates to rise, bond yields to rise, and indeed some room for the equity markets to rally.
OK, what if the EU... I mean, is there any chance, Nina, that actually the EU says, OK, we can do some kind of backstop with a limit on it, and that would get it through Parliament?
The EU can give some concessions on the backstop. And if you actually look at the withdrawal agreement, they say, you know, unless and until there are other solutions, this should never come into play. So they can further clarify their position in some kind of political statement. But to think that they will reopen the withdrawal agreement and then offer a legally binding guarantee that this will never be used or completely remove it from the legal text, which, by the way, has been agreed with 27 countries and the British government, is just a non-starter. So if the red line by the British government is the ERG red line, then there is no room for compromise.
James, talk to me a little bit about the UK economy, because we're underestimating the fact that a lot of retailers and a lot of companies are preparing for no-deal Brexit. That means stockpiling. If we do have a no-deal Brexit, maybe they're prepared. But if they don't have a no-deal Brexit, what do they do with the stockpiling? Would it automatically also hit the UK economy?
Well, it has two impacts. One is that there will be reduced orders because of the pre-ordering in order to do the stockpiling. Right. So we are getting growth brought forward, if you like, into the economy. And secondly, they will then have to sell off the goods. And one might reasonably hope there will be an uptick in optimism in prior periods of major political uncertainty. Consumers have bounced in confidence terms, and that would be the hope. But, you know, to put numbers to where the Bank of England may take rates, I would suspect that if there is no deal, the bank will cut rates. Yep. But if there is a deal, I would not be at all surprised if over the next 18 months rates go to at least 1.5%.
Nina, would Cabinet to try and actually topple Theresa May? Is there someone within the Conservative Party that would do a better job?
This close down to the wire, I think that even, you know, within the Conservative government, there is a realization that a kind of shift in power and change in Prime Minister is not necessarily going to influence the outcome for in a more positive direction. I think what you might see is that Cabinet members might resign if they're not given a free vote if the deal does not go through the next time on the extension of Article 50. And I think that's what Theresa May promised her kind of softer remainers in the Cabinet when they kind of voted for the Brady Amendment last week.